First, we will go through the basic that we need to know about quantitative research approach, and in later section, I will go through on more technical part, which is the survey instrument. Okay, before we discuss further on other aspects of quantitative research, it is important for us to understand what is quantitative research is about. Quantitative research is a systematic investigation that uses precise measurement to obtain answer to a research question. So in an attempt to explain the observed phenomena, researchers will use mathematical expression as the basis to explain the findings. The process may begin with development of research hypotheses, testing the hypothesis through survey or experiment, analyze the collected data through statistical analysis, and present the finding in statistical model. As the quantitative research uses mathematical expression, scholars therefore associate this design with positivism point of view. This is because this philosophical view recognizes that a phenomena can be systematically observed through scientific technique, and it also can be quantified and measured by an observer or the researcher. In the literature, there are many studies that talk about quantitative research design, and the classification system sometimes varies based on the area reviewed by the scholars. However, these scholars are actually referring to the similar design. So for this lecture, I will explain the two basic types of quantitative research design, which is experimental and non-experimental research. This classification that, as shown in the figure, is based on the framework explained by Marroni et al. 2020. They have classified quantitative research design into twofold, which is experimental and non-experimental, based on the level of scientific rigorosity and integrity of this design. For natural scientists, they usually conduct experiments to achieve hypotheses related to sciences area like chemistry, biology, or in other applied fields like agriculture or medicine. So the process of experimental research are as what many people would know, which is it is a rigorous process. Such design process could actually be used in social science research. So through this process, it will enable the social scientists to present evidence about the causality effect of particular social science issues, which could not be achieved through a non-experimental approach. So experimental research can be as rigid and structured as in the true experimental, or it can be conducted in more moderate approach, which is known as the quasi-experimental. So both experimental design actually has similar aim, which is to determine the cause and effect of a relationship. It's just that the true experimental design tend to be more rigorous compared to the quasi-experimental. So true experimental research design involve three elements. It must have a control condition, the respondents must be selected through a proper randomization, and it also involves manipulation of the variables. For quasi-experimental design, although it may have lacked one of the three conditions, the process still includes pre and post tests. This is to ensure the validity of the finding about the causality evidence. At the end of this lecture, I will give you a list of resources on experimental research so that you can do further readings on this approach. Non-experimental research design address questions pertaining to descriptive, comparative, and correlational research questions. In descriptive research, the aim is to understand a specific situation within an identified population. So the research question developed usually concerned with a question like what is, what was. So through this descriptive analysis, we are able to describe a particular situation or trend of social context through the numerical data that we have obtained from the data collection. In comparative research, on the other hand, examine the difference between the two groups. It still use descriptive data, and the question usually concerned with identifying the difference of particular groups in relation to the dependent variable. For correlational research, the purpose is to examine the relationship among variables. It is important to note that correlational research does not aim to determine the causality effect of the two groups of variables, but it only investigates the extent to which the two variables are related. So within correlational studies, we cannot draw the same conclusion as what we have obtained through experimental research, because in the non-experimental research, there is no control done on the group studied and no manipulation done on the variables as well. So obviously, without this level of control, it is not possible for us to provide a valid causality effect of the trend that we studied. So how do we choose the appropriate quantitative design for our research? So in order to do this, firstly, we must be clear on the purpose of the research. Having a clear understanding of research purpose, it will help you to determine the approach for the quantitative research. For example, let's say you want to establish a framework on the factors that have impact on environmental practices of contractors in Malaysia construction project. So from this research purpose, you are able to identify the independent and dependent variables involved, the group that you want to study, and the expected outcome of your research. So this will assist you in designing the data collection and analysis that you require to achieve the research purpose. Secondly, the choice of quantitative approach could also be eased when you develop the research question and hypothesis. For quantitative research, we use deductive approach from the established theories to develop the research question and hypothesis. For example, question related to what is, what was, how many, how often. This question connects with descriptive research. For correlational research, where it concerns in predicting the relationship between the two variables. This type of study we will use correlational research. So by having clear picture of this research question and hypothesis, this will enable you to identify the suitable design for the study. Similarly, we need to put advanced consideration about the measurement involved in our research, the statistical analysis that we plan to use, whether it is descriptive or correlational analysis, and the expected outcome of the research. So consideration of this aspect will give us a clear picture of a design that is suitable for the research. So in a nutshell, you need to do a thorough reading first, and then decision on which design that is suitable for your research. You need to discuss thoroughly with your research supervisor, and I also recommend that you examine the pro and con of each type of this research design and how it is suitable to answer your research design within the resources that you have during your study period. Quantitative research has many advantages. First, quantitative research allows the researcher to collect data from a large sample size. This will aid in the generalization of the research findings. Second, via the various online survey platforms available, the researcher is also able to collect data in a more quick manner. So this will aid in expediting the overall research process. With the use of the statistical software available in the market as well, quantitative data analysis can also be done quickly. However, this can be a tricky one to the newbies as it may take some time to get familiar with the features of the software. So the software can also generate the numerical result in attractive format. So for example, by using graph, charts, and tables. So these formats allow a better interpretation of the findings. Lastly, compared to wordy reports, decision makers usually prefer numerical data as they see the data are more credible and reliable to support their decision making. So these are some of the strengths that is related to the quantitative research. However, quantitative research also may have disadvantages. Firstly, using quantitative research may give the respondents limited options to respond based on the skill selection made by the researcher. Sometimes there are very limited space provided for the respondents for free text response. So the contextual detail may be missing here. Second, quantitative research may have potential for bias. Based on experience, sometimes those who are willing to respond to the survey may have characteristics that don't apply to the required audience. So this will lead to improper presentation of the target population. Thirdly, a poor design of questionnaire may lead to misunderstanding of questions. Therefore, it is important to ensure that the questions of the survey are correctly worded and correct answer options are included in the questionnaire. Okay, later on we will discuss on a few good tips to consider when designing a survey questions. As we have go through what quantitative research is about, okay, now let's move on to the second section of this lecture, which is the survey instrument. Survey is widely used instrument in the social science research. It is used as one of the techniques for gathering data because following the principles of positivism, survey research rests on the assumptions that social reality is made up of stable, objective fact. So with that, we can precisely measure features of social reality and convert it into quantitative data. So what is survey? The survey, it involves collection of primary data about the subject through the use of questionnaire, and it is collected from the representative of sample population related to the study. So this representative are called respondents. Survey can take many forms. It can be done online through many online platforms like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, or it can be a paper-based questionnaire too. Okay, when to use a survey? Obviously, survey is needed when you need to collect quantitative information. According to Newman 2014, survey can be used when you need to ask the following aspect, which is on behavior, attitude, beliefs or opinion, characteristic, expectation, self-classification, as well as knowledge. To collect a quantitative data, there are several types of survey that can be considered. The first one, which is the most commonly used nowadays, is the mail-out survey. A mail-out survey is a form of distribution of survey question via electronic platform. In the website, there are various electronic e-platform that we can use, like Google Form, SurveyMonkey, and we can even distribute the questionnaire form through email. So in the current COVID-19 pandemic, I think this is a type of survey that could be the most convenient one. One of the advantage of the mail-out survey is it saves a lot of cost for the researcher. So with this, with the mail-out survey, the researcher do not need to spend their time and money on traveling and accommodation. However, due to the lack of engagement between the researcher and respondent, this could also lead to a drawback that, in a sense, that the researcher cannot get the feedback within the stipulated time. It's similar to mail-out survey. The telephone survey is also the type of survey that could save the researcher's time and cost. However, the disadvantages would be that not all of the respondents are willing to participate in a telephone conversation and giving information. It end up that there are possibility that they will just hang up the phone conversation during the interview session. Lastly, the in-person survey. This method requires the respondent to collect data by meeting the this method requires the researcher to collect data by meeting face-to-face with the respondent. Although this method has many advantages in terms of the researcher can properly administer the questionnaire session, due to current pandemic outbreak, this method may become the last option to opt to. These are some of the criteria that you need to consider before conducting a survey. First, you need to make sure that this method will produce the kind of data that is able to answer your research objective and question. Second, you need to make sure that the measurement that you have developed are accurate and suitable for producing the correct result. Thirdly, you also need to ensure that the group that you approach represent the entire group of the survey. This is to ensure that the generalization of the result. Fourth, you need to ensure that the survey method is also convenient for you to administer, especially in terms of time, cost, and other resources needed for conducting the survey. Although there is no scientific method for designing an ideal questionnaire, however, these are some of the common steps that you may follow to design a questionnaire survey. The first step is to clarify the purpose of the questionnaire. So, the researcher himself needs to be clear on the purpose of the questionnaire that he wants to develop. In order to do this, he needs to revisit the research objective and be clear of what are the issues that he is trying to explore at the first place. This is important because it will ensure the questionnaire questions meet the research objective and the questions that are being designed are focused and clear. After having clear understanding on the purpose of the questionnaire, then you need to identify the main variables or domain of your research. This is important because these variables will form as the important part of the content of your questionnaire. You will also need to check whether is there any existing survey with similar objective and measurement in the previous journal. If yes, you may adopt some or all of the question based on the requirement of your research objective. Let's say there is none. You need to develop a new instrument from the previous literature. All of this can be achieved through a rigorous review of the literature review. Next, you need to know who is your target respondent. It is important for you to identify and do detailed search of the respondents that you want to approach. Are they the individual, or a group, or the organization itself? By considering who they are, it will lead to important consideration on the practical time that we should allow them to complete the questionnaire. And it will also make us think in advance on what are the difficulty that they might face and try to overcome the difficulty so that they are able to answer your survey. In designing a questionnaire, it is important to choose a suitable response type for the survey question. This is because survey answer options are just as important as the question themselves. If the skills are confusing or unbalanced, it will end up to a skewed result. There are many types of answer options available. It is important that their use is not mismatched with the question's design. For example, if you're asking the respondents on how satisfied they are with the service provided by the cafe, the rating scale that is suitable is the satisfied answer scale, ranking from strongly dissatisfied to strongly satisfied. And not the dichotomous yes or no answer type. Other than that, you must also decide on the use of balance scale, with the lowest sentiment at the bottom and the best at the top. So lastly, you must also be consistent with the scale of formatting used throughout the questions. And you must ensure that they are not mixed up across questions. As you write the questions, these are some of the helpful tips that can help you throughout the writing process. First, questions must be clear, direct, and concise. In order to do that, all double-barrel questions must be avoided. For example, instead of asking the respondents, "Do you like design and location of the house?" you can ask them separately, "Do you like the house design?" And "Do you like the location of the house?" And then you can avoid leading questions that can influence the respondent's answer. How do you identify a leading questions? Leading questions usually have a subjective adjective added to the questions. For example, how awesome is the product? To fix these questions, you can ask them, how can you rate this product? Questionnaire question must also be non-threatening. It is important so that the respondent can answer without worrying on the consequences of him giving the answer. By ensuring the anonymity of the respondents, in many cases, this could also increase the likeliness of the respondents to provide an honest response. So, in the question, you can also give assurance with attaching the confidentiality policy that being upheld by the research work. The structure of the questionnaire may include these 5 components. First, you can have a cover letter as an attachment, and you can begin your question with asking the respondents demographic information, and then ask questions pertaining to the independent variables. Following that, you can ask questions related to dependent variables and some open-ended questions as a closing part. So it's important for you to ensure that these questions accommodate with the research objective and the purpose of questionnaire that you have said earlier. Why a cover letter is important? Cover letter is the best avenue for you to persuade the respondents to answer your questionnaire. So in a cover letter, you may begin with introducing yourself, briefly introduce the research, explain why the study is important, and justify why the respondents' response are highly needed for the research. It is also important for you to give assurance on the anonymity of the respondents if they decided to answer the questions. Last but not least, don't forget to convey your appreciation, thanking the respondents in advance for the time spent for answering the survey. Another important aspect to be considered is the overall formatting and layout of the questionnaire. The format used should be clear, easy to follow, and easy to be completed by the respondents. It must also be neat and convenient to the respondents, as these are important aspects to be considered, as it may influence the response given by the users. When designing the questionnaire, it is important that you incorporate the analysis plan at this stage. By doing this, it's easier for you to trace which items belong to which analysis at later stage. After you have finalized your questionnaire, it is crucial for the question to be pre-tested via a process that we call a pilot study. Pilot study is a crucial step before conducting the real survey. It is because a questionnaire may look clear enough for the researcher, as they are the one who designed it, but may not be clear for the potential respondents. So, the purpose of the pilot study is to refine the questionnaire so that the respondents will have no problem in answering the question, and it will be easier as well for the researcher to record the answer. The pre-testing could be conducted on a small sample of respondents from the similar sample. The process of pilot testing allows the researcher to obtain feedback on the problem that may arise and make necessary correction before the real survey are conducted. The actual survey should be conducted on different respondents other than those who have involved in the pre-testing. With that, we now have come to the end of the lecture of quantitative research for part 1. In this lecture, we have unveiled the basic about quantitative research. We have also discussed the survey instruments as a means of collecting quantitative data, and we also have discovered some of the useful tips that you can apply when preparing or designing a questionnaire. So if you have any questions, you may email to me at my email address. In next video lecture, you'll be introduced on another important component of quantitative research, which is on population and sampling.